Good morning, everyone. It is 9 a.m. Eastern, so we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jessica Dean. I am the Director of Transportation at AIM. I'm the Director of Marketing at AIM Transportation Solutions. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and just give you guys a really brief intro, and then I'm going to pass the mic over to Ron Bork, who is AIM's Vice President of Safety and Compliance, and Bob Thibodeau, our Director of Safety. Those gentlemen are our hosts today. On one note, we are recording this meeting, just letting you know of that. This afternoon, I'm going to send out an email to everyone who registered for the meeting. It'll have recordings, the links to the recordings from this session and our session yesterday afternoon, a PDF of Ron's slide deck, and it'll also have Ron and Bob's contact information. You can use these resources to share them with your drivers, your dispatchers, anybody who would find them valuable. And also for the contact information, you can feel free to reach out to Ron or Bob at any time if you have follow-up questions. With that being said, we will be taking questions at the end of this session. So towards the end, Ron will just let everybody know we're at the questions segment of the presentation, and you can unmute yourself at that time. You're also welcome to type your questions into the chat function, and I'll read them out loud to Ron and Bob. So just a little bit of background on our company. AIM Transportation Solutions is a full service transportation solutions provider. We have two main divisions. The first of those is AIM Leasing Company. Many people on the call today are actually customers of AIM Leasing Company. So you're kind of familiar with us. We're the largest privately held full service leasing company in the country, with nearly 50 service locations nationwide. We're a member of the National Lease Affiliate Network, which has over 1,000 locations nationwide. We provide full service leasing, commercial rentals, maintenance programs, professional shop management, and the sale of used equipment. So really anything you're looking for, we have a solution for you. And then we also have a second division, which is AIM Integrated Logistics. This division provides contract carriage and brokerage. So one of the things that we have with AIM Integrated Logistics, we're hiring drivers and hiring and employing and retaining them. So we have a robust safety department to help us keep those drivers safe, keep those drivers compliant, and our divisions share resources. So AIM Integrated Logistics partners with our leasing customers, and something that we've done historically is our safety departments come out and done customer safety meetings with our leasing customers. Obviously, we're in kind of a weird year with COVID and everything, so we can't really come out and perform safety meetings on site with our leasing customers like we've done in years past. So we have this webinar today to kind of replace that and help supplement some of those resources that you would be receiving face-to-face otherwise. So that's kind of my spiel. And with that being said, I will pass the mic over to Ron. Good morning, Ron.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. First of all, thanks for making us a part of your day today. I know that everybody's very busy, and it's nice that you're all taking time to help ensure that your employees are safe. So today's discussion is going to be focused around driver safety. This is really the target audience here is really drivers. So this is really intended for those who are in cab, and if you are not in cab, these are good messages to push out to your employees who operate commercial motor vehicles, or later you could have them watch this recording if you wanted to do that. So with that, let's get started. Let me see. Sorry, a little technical difficulty. Okay. I'd like to review the agenda before we get started. First, we'll be passing back and forth between Bob and I. Bob's going to cover Operation Snowflake, which is AIM's version of winter readiness. Then we're going to talk specifically about driver and vehicle readiness for winter driving. We're going to talk about some key inspection points, things that absolutely should not be missed, even in a very brief 10-minute inspection. These are the things you should expect your drivers to always catch. Defensive driving will have an overview specific to winter operations. Then we're going to talk about some of the injury risks of the season. And then we're going to have a quick, brief overview of the hours of service changes that took place in September. So on September 29th, there were 4 regulation changes, and we're going to cover those very briefly. And with that, we'll hand it over to Bob for Operation Snowflake.
Thanks, Ron. So Operation Snowflake is a program that AIM National Lease puts out every winter in preparation for the snow and cold weather. There's 5 things that we want to focus on with respect to the truck. Very first is starting the engine, and it's important, particularly in real cold weather, that you not crank the engine more than 15 seconds to avoid wearing the batteries down. And 3 or 4 times on those 15 seconds should be about the max. If it doesn't start at that point, then we recommend that you call Road Rescue. Road Rescue is our breakdown department, and that is in operation 24/7, and they will assist on any breakdown, including no starts. It's also important to remember not to use starting fluid. Years ago, engines, you could use starting fluid. Today's engines, not so much. We're not using starting fluid. Next is the engine heater, or block heater, as it's sometimes referred to. Keep in mind, these engine heaters don't warm a cold engine. So that's why it's important that when your drivers come back, they plug the truck in while it's still warm. That's very important. And of course, you want to make sure you have a power outlet that's functional and a good extension cord of a gauge sufficient enough to carry the current. Air tanks. Upon return, we want to make sure that we're draining these air tanks to expel the moisture that is collected in them. Sometimes the air dryer doesn't function at 100% capacity, and a little bit of moisture sometimes goes into the air tanks themselves. Plus, the fluctuation of the temperature will have condensation occur. So there's wire ropes that attach to the drain valve. So that needs to be part of the post-trip inspection, and pull that wire rope and drain those tanks. Make sure that they empty out. Next is fuel. Obviously, extremely important. All AIM fuel is blended with an additive that helps prevent gelling. Gelling is a effect that happens where cold weather, sufficiently cold, we're talking probably in the neighborhood of 25 degrees or less, causes some of the paraffin or wax molecules in the fuel to, as it were, drop out and bind together, resulting in the fuel filters plugging up and starving the engine for fuel. So AIM blends all their fuel. And if you're operating in areas that don't have blended fuel, such as down south, you want to carry a fuel additive with you that will help reduce the gelling effect if you travel north then. And make sure it's for ultra low sulfur diesel fuel only. There's different kinds of additive out there. So very important, and follow the instructions on the bottle. More is not always better. If there's too much additive, it can affect the injectors. And warning lights. The new trucks today are very sensitive, and if a warning light comes on, make sure that your drivers do not ignore that warning light. Please pay attention to those lights, and then call our road rescue department and explain what is going on, and we will diagnose that and make proper recommendations to handle that warning light. So that's pretty much it on Operation Snowflake. We do it every year, and it seems to work. It's just a reminder of what we need to do with regard to cold weather.
Thank you, Bob. Next, we're gonna dive into a little bit of winter preparation from the driver perspective. Some safety preparation for your driver. A lot of it is focused on when they break down or if they should break down, but some key things they want to make sure that they have available when they're in the truck in the winter are obviously a snow brush and scraper sufficient to reach the glass of their vehicle, whether it's a 6-foot long snow brush or, generally speaking, a snow brush that you'd use in your personal automobile or pickup truck isn't going to be sufficient for a commercial motor vehicle. So you're going to want a snow brush or scraper or scraper that will be able to reach the windshield of a truck. Last thing you need is your driver getting hurt trying to climb up and, climbing up a wheel or something similar to try to clear snow and ice from windshield and hurting himself. Next, when the sun's very low on the horizon and there's a little bit of condensation on the glass, the windows of your vehicle always look dirtier. So you want to make sure you have some window cleaner, paper towels, and make sure you maintain high levels of visibility. And to that same point, you want to make sure you have extra windshield wipers. Oftentimes they can freeze to the windshield and dislodging them can tear them, and all of a sudden you're down on the side of the road because you've got a torn windshield wiper and you can't see. So both of those are definitely good preparation points. Also, in the event that you should get stuck or have low traction, it's important to have some sort of ice melt, salt, sand. Some people will use kitty litter. Make sure it's the non-clumping variety, and having a shovel with you can help you get unstuck if you should get stuck. In addition, it goes without saying sometimes, but you'd be surprised how many drivers will show up in not properly clothed and not have additional bedding in the event that they get stuck. So maybe they're not planning to be out of the truck at all in a given day or for just a few minutes, but then they have a breakdown. So they're stuck on the side of the road and they don't have bedding or they don't have an extra jacket with them. So make sure that they're reminded to have gloves, hat, a jacket, and the key for success in cold weather and key to safety is dressing in layers. They can add and remove as needed. In addition to extra bedding, having some food and water, an extra meal or two and some water with them in the truck is imperative in the event that they're shut down on the side of the road and waiting for a tow truck for potentially hours and hours and maybe days in the worst of winter storms. So please make sure that your drivers are prepared for those sorts of situations. In addition, having their cell phone charging equipment is always a good idea, and I'm sure very normal for them to carry. But if they're a home daily driver, they might not bring their charging equipment with them. It's always important when they could potentially be broken down. In addition to that, a reflective safety vest when conditions are low visibility, and a flashlight is always a must for any driver to perform adequate inspections. In addition to driver issues, we've also got a few truck issues, truck readiness items. Some of these are covered in Operation Snowflake, but they merit repeat here, and that's plug in whenever possible. Bob's already discussed. Be sure your tires are good. AIM standard is better than the DOT standard, but make sure your tires are good for the season. Don't run them down to the DOT minimum just because they're legal. If they're legal, that's good, but make sure they're better than legal. You want to keep your fuel tanks at least half full to minimize moisture from condensation in the tanks. In addition to that, if you are unexpectedly detained due to breakdown or winter conditions, you want to make sure you have enough fuel to keep yourself warm in the winter. So make sure those tanks are half full. It's a good safety precaution. And don't get left on the side of the road by ignoring those engine lights. Everything happens slower in the winter, except breakdowns. They seem to happen faster. So please don't get stuck on the side of the road by ignoring engine lights. One service that AIM does offer is monitoring of your telematics system for codes sent out by the diagnostic system of the truck. So if you've got a PeopleNet system or a Qualcomm system or some other ELD platform installed in the vehicle, get that information over to your salesperson and they can get you signed up if you're not already, so that we can monitor those alerts that are sent out by the vehicle itself to try to keep your uptime as high as possible. And again, fuel additive, we've already covered. Another thing to make sure you've got with you related to the vehicle is extra coolant. If you're low on coolant, you're going to be low on heat in the truck, and you never want to add water in the winter. Obviously, that's going to cause problems. And washer fluid is going to go a lot faster in the winter as road spray increases. You're going to want to make sure that you have washer fluid and your red reflective triangles in case you do get stuck. And then we're going to move on to vehicle inspections. These are some of the high points for vehicle inspections and some of the most basic things that we look at in inspections, you know, are the old BLTs of trucking, not sandwiches. It's not lunchtime yet. It's brakes, lights, and tires. Those are the main points in inspections. I've done a little analysis recently, and about 45% of the violations that AIM's seen with our own fleet comes from these three main categories. So whether it's a brake out of adjustment, which is very common, or a tire that doesn't meet DOT standards, or a light out that a driver missed in his inspection. These are the most common violations in every fleet in America. Whether it's brakes, lights, or tires, one of those is going to be your most common violation. So you want to make sure that those things are inspected regularly. And when it comes to brakes, you want to make sure that your pads are free of any contaminants, whether it's grease or oil. You want to make sure the linings are sufficiently thick and you don't have any cracks or breaks. And make sure that your drivers know about the brake test. The brake test is included. The full text of how to perform the in-cab brake test is included in this presentation, which you'll receive later today. So make sure that your drivers are familiar with that. And also make sure that every time they drop and hook a new trailer that they're doing the brake test again, because they've got new components to their braking system. They want to make sure they don't have any air leaks in those components, that those brakes work every time they do a drop and hook. So make sure that that's being done. As far as lights, you know, the standard is pretty simple. Are they working? Are they clean? You know, in the wintertime, clean means, you know, free of snow, and the LEDs don't melt snow off like the incandescent bulbs. They don't generate sufficient heat to melt that snow. So you want to make sure that they're brushed off, that they're clean, the lenses aren't broken, you don't actually have a light missing. In addition to that, you want to make sure the reflective tape's wiped down and invisible, or there. Sometimes on the ICC bumper at the back of the trailer or back of the box truck, it can get scraped off pretty easily at truck docks. So you want to make sure that all of those items are in place and working properly. And then with regard to tires, tread depth is a no-brainer. You know, and we've got some standards listed here. Again, AIM standards are better than DOT standards, so make sure that your tires are sufficient. In addition to tread depth, you want to look at the wear pattern to make sure you don't have uneven wear or flat spots from being dragged, and make sure your air pressure is, you know, up to spec. Typically 105 degrees, or I'm sorry, 105 pounds. I wish it was 105 degrees. And then as far as the first section was really some safety equipment on the truck. These are some safety equipment that I consider to be external to the truck. So these are things that are going to keep the public safe around you, and that is the jaws. You want to make sure you don't lose the trailer that you've got hooked. Make sure your fifth wheel is properly locked, and the only way to do that is to get a visual on the jaws to make sure that it's totally encompassing that kingpin. and that the pins are in place and the driver's doing a tug test to make sure that he's properly hooked. You don't want to have him lose a trailer and cause a catastrophe. Airlines, they're commonly chafed, rubbing, they can get bulges or kinks, and they obviously can leak. So all those things need to be checked on a regular basis to make sure that their systems are all working properly. And fluids, look for leaks and that they're in their correct operating ranges. The next section of inspection points to not miss would be personal safety items for the driver. Every time they get in and out of the truck, and we're going to talk about 3 points of contact. I don't think any safety meeting is complete without a little reminder on 3 points of contact. Being the most common injury risk for the driver is getting in and out of the truck. But make sure they check the steps and the handholds, catwalk and the ladders to make sure that they're safe. They're relying on those pieces of equipment every day when they get in and out. And some guys get in and out of their truck an awful lot in some operations. So make sure that they want to make sure that those are secure, properly mounted, and that they're not broken. Load issues will keep the people around them safe and themselves as they open doors and work around the freight if they're working around the freight. So they want to check their securement devices, make sure their doors work properly, the door ties are in place and functioning, and that any material handling equipment that they have on board is working properly, whether it's a pallet jack or a forklift or whatever they've got on board. Even a two-wheel dolly, make sure those are in good condition. And then general condition of the vehicle. If there's accident damage, driver needs to make sure that it's addressed and secured. If there are glass issues, you want to make sure none of your windows or mirrors are cracked or insecure. I think that's about it for your key points on the brake or on the vehicle. And then you got your brake test. So your brake test, this is a 10-point process or procedure to go through in cab, and this will detect any defect in the brake system from an air pressure standpoint, just by operating the brakes and seeing how they react and making sure that everything works properly. The driver will be able to detect a number of issues from in the cab by doing this procedure, and it takes about 3 minutes. So with that, we're going to hand it back over to Bob for a little review of defensive driving strategies specific to the winter, and it'll mostly be about the Smith system.
Thanks, Ron. As Ron mentioned, this is probably the most important system that you can share with your drivers on keeping them safe as they drive mile after mile, and keep the motoring public safe as well. Defensive driving is just a given, and there's a number of different systems out there. One of the competing systems is put out by the National Safety Council, and they have 8 modules, an hour each. And when you sit through 8 hours of defensive driving, you come away thinking, geez, what did I actually learn? With the Smith system, this was put together by a truck driver in 1952. And even if you've never heard of it, a good driver will utilize these 5 points, or what they call keys. And there's 5 keys to the Smith system, and they're listed right here for you. Aim high in steering, get the big picture, keep your eyes moving, leave yourself an out, and make sure they see you. They're very simple. The most important of the 5 are the first 2, aim high in steering and get the big picture. Obtaining space, visibility, and time to make decisions is a key component to the Smith system and safe operation. It's estimated that in the course of driving, say, 1 mile, on average, a driver will make up to 115 decisions in that mile. So there's a lot to take in and observe. And this first key, aim high in steering, will certainly allow your drivers to pull in this information and decide what needs acted upon. So aim high doesn't mean looking up in the sky. It means looking down the road. You could say, look as far down the road as you can. They break it down, the Smith breaks it down into looking into the future, 15 to 30 seconds. In other words, where your truck is going to be in 15 to 30 seconds. Give you an example, and that'll vary on speed. So if you're running through a city area and you're doing, say, 30 miles an hour, 15 seconds is about a block and a half that you're looking ahead. At 30 seconds, now you're up to about 3 city blocks. Out on the highway, 50, 55 miles an hour, 15 seconds is about a quarter mile. And obviously, you'd like to double that to 30 seconds or looking a half mile down the road. And you're looking for signs that are indicating maybe a speed limit change. How many times have you counseled a driver that gets a speeding ticket and the driver says, gee, I didn't see the sign indicating a change in speed limit. So the driver needs to practice good visual search techniques, and this key will help do that. Another example is many roadways have restricted lanes where trucks are not allowed to be. And there's signs, but not very frequent. Again, read every sign and make adjustments accordingly. A prime example, most all states have a state law that requires drivers or motorists to move left when there's an emergency vehicle on the shoulder attending to a breakdown, or, for example, a police officer doing an enforcement action. If you aim high in steering, you'll be able to make a safe lane change and comply with the state law by moving left and finding a place in the line of traffic that you can safely put yourself. Otherwise, you're going to come close to that officer and the vehicle that he's dealing with, and you would have to slow down. State law requires that, but it's much safer to move left. And this key will help you do that and find your place in traffic. The second key is get the big picture. And this key will help you determine a safe following distance. So every driver that obtains a CDL has to take an exam, a written exam. And in that manual, it talks about the federal formula for establishing a safe following distance. It's called timed interval driving. And it simply means you take the length of your vehicle, tractor trailer, for example, 70 feet long, and you take 1 second for every 10 foot of vehicle length at speeds under 40 miles an hour. And then you watch the you watch the rear bumper of the vehicle in front of you pass a stationary object such as a shadow, a bridge abutment, a signpost, and begin counting 1001, 1002, 1003. And if your front bumper reaches that point that you've picked out before you hit 7 seconds, well, you're following too close at that point. This is crucial because after a head-on collision, the most serious crash involving high-cost dollars in terms of property damage, as well as personal injury, are rear-end crashes. And drivers have the most control of the space in front of them. So using this formula every day, every mile, is key to operating safely. So it's the timed interval driving method. This would be the minimum that you'd want to maintain. And again, it's a big gap and people will cut in, but they'll also move back out. If you have adverse conditions such as snow, rain, sleet, you want to slow down and open up that following distance even more. You may want to go from 7 seconds to 8, 9, even 10 seconds, depending on the conditions. Nighttime, same thing. You may want to add a second, moving from 7 to 8. So this is important to convey to your drivers if they don't already use it. One of the keys that you can look at with your driver is ask the driver, how do you determine a safe following distance? That'll be a real eye opener for you, because you ask that question and then you want that driver to respond. Hopefully he's going to say, well, I try to keep 6 or 7 seconds of following distance. In my experience, what I found, well, I try to keep two truck lengths. Right away, that tells me that driver has forgotten the formula that was required to be learned when he got the CDL. So that's an opportunity for training at that point to introduce the Smith system and focus on a safe following distance. The third key is keep your eyes moving. And this key helps you stay focused on the changing scenery around you. You have two types of vision. One is central vision, and it has 3 degrees of focus. And then the peripheral vision, and that's 180 degrees. And in a DOT exam, part of the exam includes checking the eyes, have to be able to detect red, green, and amber, but also they check the peripheral vision of the driver. And most drivers have about 90 degrees in each eye, or a total of 180 degrees. That's very important. The minimum requirement is 70 degrees for each eye. If you don't meet that, then the exam is canceled and you no longer qualify. But at the bottom, it says, try reading this line of text while only looking at the word in red without moving your eyes. What you find then, you're using central vision, but the peripheral vision becomes blurred and you can't define the rest of the sentence or see it clearly. Peripheral vision is your early warning system. That'll help detect movement and allow the central field to be focused and see what needs investigated and see if it has any impact on your speed or direction. Mirror use, extremely important. Have to use your mirrors to see what's around your vehicle. And you scan your mirrors every 5 to 8 seconds. Right mirror use is often neglected, and you want to focus on that. Keeping your eyes moving will help allow you to stay focused on what is going on around your vehicle at all times. The fourth key is leave yourself an out. And this is often referred to as space cushion driving. Again, the space that's easiest to control is that in front. The hardest to control is the rear. But I tell my drivers, don't worry so much about the rear. I want you to focus on what's in front of you. And if you're about to make a lane change, know what is to your sides. Because if you make one lane change, generally you're going to come back and make another. So try to position yourself in traffic where there's the least amount of vehicles around you. It's safer that way. The next key is make sure you're seen, or make sure they see you. Again, it's all about visibility. See and be seen. And if there's ever a question about this, for example, at an intersection, before you start up, you wait 1 or 2 seconds, making sure the other vehicles are stopping. And if there's any doubt about a motorist seeing you, you can always tap the horn. Be selective about the use of the air horn. Tapping your brakes. Vehicles behind you can't see what's up in front of you because of your height. So tapping brakes sends a message to the vehicles behind you that you're making a decision and you want to give them fair warning. Turn signals, same thing. I'm sure you've been on the highways driving and you see a driver, one, maybe two flashes on the turn signal, and that's it. Again, lane changes should be planned and turn signals should be activated for at least 10 flashes. Four-way flashers also can be activated. Headlights on and off, high beam, low beam. Even tapping your brake pedal can send a message by the exhausting air sound that the pedestrian may not be aware, and it'll catch their attention. So see and be seen, make sure they see you. That's the fifth key. Again, putting them together is really easy to do. And I strongly recommend that you train your drivers on the Smith system of defensive driving. It'll make them a better driver, a safer driver, and the motoring public will be appreciative as well.
And just we are going to include a little write-up in the distribution that they're going to receive. That's a multi-page document on each key with some more detail.
Next is winter injury risks. And the very first thing is it's slip and fall season. Can't emphasize that enough. One of the best things that you can do is wear proper footwear. Not leather-soled shoes. You want to have neoprene or rubber safety boots, preferably composite toe or steel toe with a small heel, not a large heel, and good tread, good for traction. Very important. Footwear cannot be overemphasized. And again, you want to wear something that'll help you be seen. And as you see in the diagram, the employee has a vest on, a reflective vest. That's very important. Plan ahead, walk consciously on icy sidewalks and parking lots. Can't emphasize that enough. Some of you may remember the Carol Burnett show, and one of the actors was Tim Conway. And whenever he would play the elderly gentleman, he would do the Tim Conway shuffle. Some refer to it as the penguin walk. This is on snow and ice or any conditions that are slippery. And again, watch shaded areas when it's 32 degrees or lower, because that'll be opportunity for black ice. Looks wet, but it's actually ice. So you want to be aware of that. Take small steps, shuffle, and hold on to rails, your trailer, the side rail of your trailer, and don't park if you can avoid parking next to any situations where there's ice. It's real important to watch where you walk. Be responsible for your own personal safety. One of the things that I like to say to my drivers is don't put your feet where your eyes haven't been. Well, if you think about that, that simply means watch where you're walking. Be deliberate about your steps and look for uneven surfaces. Don't take shortcuts that would require you to walk over snow piles or ice. And again, when you enter a building making a delivery, be aware your feet, your shoes will be wet, and you want to try and dry them off so you don't slip on surfaces that such as tile or brick. Look up while you're walking around. A lot of times you'll see icicles hanging, and they can be a danger as well. So be aware of your surroundings as you are in and out of the truck anywhere from 5 to 50 times a day. And to that end, that second bullet point says always use 3 points of contact when entering or exiting the truck. It's amazing how many drivers don't utilize this safety key here, because they'll exit their truck as if they're going down a flight of stairs at the house. If, for example, a 250-pound person jumps from, say, the second step, roughly 33 inches high, onto the ground, that exerts a impact force to your body somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,100 pounds. That's an incredible jolt to your system. And you do that day after day, time after time, and it can cause extreme wear to the body. So you exit the truck facing inward. You have 2 hands in contact and a foot, or 2 feet and a hand, and you exit slowly, watching where you are stepping as you exit, even onto the surface. So you're not stepping into diesel fuel or grease or any uneven surface such as a rock or pothole. This is something that you can encourage your drivers to utilize and utilize correctly. It is just so very important to their safety. Go to a truck stop, watch drivers exit their vehicles, and you'll be amazed at how many do not use this simple safety measure. And again, you have to have hands free. You can't have your coffee in your hand, your paperwork, your briefcase. Put them on the floor, put them on the seat, and focus on proper entry and exit using 3 points of contact. The next slide talks about the extreme cold and frostbite. Ron covered winter preparation, having extra clothing with you, even extra gloves. Sometimes dealing with, depending on the situation, gloves can get wet. And if a driver uses gloves and he's getting out of the truck or into the truck, his hand could slip on the handle, the handhold. So good gloves, tassel hat or some type of hat, head covering, and avoid hypothermia by layering your clothes and staying warm. Particularly if you're into a breakdown situation and your truck can't run. We try to do wellness checks with our drivers, and in extreme cold, we will ask state police to stop by and provide temporary shelter if it's going to be a long while for breakdown to the scene. And warm up and stretch if you need to do physical work, if you're making deliveries. That's important before, and you can even do this in the cab of your truck, in the driver's seat, and then when you exit, you can do a couple of stretches before you begin. It's very easy to do, doesn't take very long, much more than 1 or 2 minutes, and you stretch those muscles and lessen the chance of a sprain or strain. That's it. Ron?
All right, thank you, Bob. The last module we're going to go through, the last topic today, is the hours of service update from this past September. And there were four rule changes in that update. We're going to get to those, but what the stated purpose of that is to provide flexibility for the drivers. And each of these items really builds on the flexibility that drivers have to run their freight or operate their vehicle when they feel that they're not fatigued, and allows them to kind of make their own schedule and make sure that they're not forced to drive at a time that they don't feel up to driving. So FMCSA doesn't see that there's going to be any negative safety outcome from any of these changes. That remains to be seen, but I think that all of the drivers will appreciate all of the changes that have been made. They're all in their benefit. So the 4 areas of change are: the short haul exception has been expanded, adverse driving conditions exception has been also expanded, the 30-minute break revised, and the sleeper berth or split sleeper rule has been updated. So I'm going to be very brief on this, and one of the things that we're going to distribute with this recording is a previous webinar that we did that goes into these changes in a little more detail. So, and we're also going to have questions at the end if you have something specific you want to ask. But the expansion of the short haul exception, the 100 air mile radius for CDL drivers has been expanded to match the non-CDL drivers at 150 air miles. And while operating under this exception, drivers do not need to use an ELD or take a 30-minute break. And with that expansion of the air mile radius and the increase from the 12-hour limit to the 14-hour limit, you've got more drivers that are going to qualify for that exception and not need to take that break or not need to use an ELD. So that's been a nice change. In addition to that, the adverse driving exception has been expanded to allow 2 additional drive hours. And I'm sorry, I should have also mentioned that the gray box is the old rule. The green box on the upper right is the new rule. And there's some detail down below, some explanation. But the old rule for adverse driving condition gave 2 additional drive hours. So the 11-hour clock was allowed to be 13, and there were no additional hours added for the 14-hour limit. Under the new rule, driver can operate up to 13 hours in adverse conditions and have a maximum day of 16 hours. So 2 additional on-duty hours were provided as well. And there was a slight change in the wording to make it that the dispatcher is the one that really should decide that. And it's up to the dispatcher to foresee the adverse conditions. And as a best practice, we're recommending that only a dispatcher make the decision to use this rule. This is a last resort rule and really something that we recommend only be used in the absence of other options. I saw a funny video on YouTube that said, this is like using your 4th string quarterback. No football team wants to put their 4th string quarterback on the field, and you're certainly not going to do that in every game. And using this rule would be like putting your worst option out there on the road. So this is the type of rule that if an inspector saw driver was using frequently, he'd really question the validity of that application. So this is a last resort. The 30-minute break is another rule, and this has been a very popular change with drivers, and that is the old rule said that within 8 hours of coming on duty, driver needed to take a 30-minute break. And that 30-minute break needed to be off duty or in the sleeper berth, no working during that 30-minute break. Couldn't move the truck, couldn't do any unloading or loading, no inspections, none of that. Under the new rule, the 30-minute break is needed only after 8 hours of cumulative driving. So it might take 10 or 12 or 14 hours to do the 8 hours of driving, and that's when the 30-minute break is needed. However, the 30-minute break could be conducted on line 4 or on duty. So a driver can do an unload event, and if that unload event takes 30 minutes, that would satisfy the need for a 30-minute break. What FMCSA is implied here is that they want the break to be a break from the windshield. They want the driver to take a break away from driving, and that any sort of activity that's non-driving would satisfy that requirement. So if the driver is taking 10 hours to get 8 hours of driving done, the chances are that he's likely had a 30-minute period of on duty or off duty and would therefore not need to take the break. And again, the 8 hours is cumulative. However, the 30-minute break that's required after the 8 cumulative hours must be continuous. So you can't add up 3 10-minute breaks to get the 30-minute break if they were interrupted with driving. It needs to be a 30-minute on-duty or off-duty period of non-driving, continuous 30 minutes. And the last and most flexible rule is the sleeper berth provision. The change here is that the sleeper berth or split sleeper would only allow an 8-hour and 2-hour combination. So minimum of 8-hour break paired with a minimum of a 2-hour break. They've expanded that to now allow a 7-3 split. Any break that's a minimum of 7 hours paired with any break minimum of 2 hours are allowed, as long as the two add up to 10 or more. And the other change, which really makes this rule very useful, even if you're not in a split sleeper situation, is that the 2-hour rest break is excluded from the 14-hour drive window. So if a driver runs his truck 6 hours and goes to a delivery, and then he's at the delivery for 3 hours off duty, at the end of the 3 hours, that 3-hour period isn't counted against his 14, and he's still got his full hours to come back home. So in that situation, if he had that 3-hour window, he'd effectively have the opportunity to work 17-hour day rather than a 14-hour day, because the 3-hour rest break would stop the 14-hour clock. So there's a tremendous amount of flexibility. When you get the materials that we send out after the webinar, if you have questions about this, start with the material from the hours of service webinar, or you can ask questions here in about 1 second. So I'm not going to get into the detail out of respect for your time today, but if you have questions, we definitely can answer them. To recap, we went over Operation Snowflake, what AIM's standards are to help keep you safe in the winter. We gave you some cold weather preparation ideas for your vehicles and your drivers. We talked a little bit about inspections and what the high points are. Bob did a great job with the Smith system and gave you some good keys to defensive driving. The winter injury risks we talked about, one of the big ones, slips and falls. And then we talked a little bit about the hours of service changes and just a quick overview of those. And with that, we're going to move on to questions. Any questions from the group?
Just a reminder, you can unmute yourself or you can type the questions into the chat function and I'll read them out loud, whichever you're more comfortable with. Okay, I got one, Ron. Where will these resources be available if I would like to share them with my drivers? That's a really good question. An email will be coming out this afternoon with links to the video, the PDF presentation, the other hours of service webinar, if you want to show that to your drivers, which goes over the regulation changes that just took effect, I think, end of September. Is that right, Ron?
Yes, 9/29.
And then Ron and Bob's contact information also.
You can call us anytime if you have questions, you want to go over anything. If you're a driver or you're in the cab, you're not sure if you've got hours or you're not sure if your ELD is calculating your split sleeper correctly, give us a call. Be more than happy to help.
Other questions? All right, well, if there's nothing else, I just want to thank you, Ron and Bob, both. We really appreciate your time today. That was really informative and very useful information for everyone. So I'll make sure that all that information gets distributed to you via email this afternoon. Thank you all for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Have a
thank
great day.
you.
All right, thank
Thanks,
you,
guys.
everyone.